As I mentioned in the previous video where I was painting the body, I'm not using regular plastic primer as I usually would on these resin parts, as of course these parts are resin and not plastic, so that primer doesn't really work all that well. I decanted some of the Tamiya primer that is suitable for metal and also works on plastic, and in this case also on resin. That was decanted, put into the airbrush, and then sprayed carefully into all the intricate corners and smaller pieces. Once that was dry, I moved on to painting the black base coat on some of the parts for the interior, which were later masked off in order to paint that Ferrari leather tan color on it as well. With all of the airbrushing, masking, and airbrushing again, removing the masking tape and all that stuff now finished, I could move on to adding some black paints to the parts that I didn't mask off, as it was harder to mask it off than just to take out a brush and paint it flat black. With the paint on the floor now completely dry, I could move on to adding some Tamiya clear on top of it to act as a glue for the flocking to stick to it to simulate that carpet look. With the paint now applied on it really thick and still soaking wet, I immediately just move on to adding the flocking on top of it using a tea sifter. I have links to all of the products down below, so feel free to check those out. Now normally when I'm building a Ferrari in the sports car range or the hypercar range or the supercar range, whatever you want to call them, I'd go for a carbon fiber instrument panel and also some carbon fiber trim on the interior. With this one not being so much of a hypercar, more of a sports car or Grand Tourer, I decided to go with a classier spec to go along with that green bodywork. And in that case, I decided to go with the gunmetal instead of a full-on carbon fiber finish. That detail was also carried on onto the steering wheel parts and some of the other pieces on the interior as well. To give it even more contrast, some of the surroundings for all the vents were also painted with a silver color to contrast the gunmetal and also look nice against the black dashboard itself. On the seats you can add a couple of black details or just leave it in the tan color as you desire. I wanted to give it a bit more life and not look as dull with one color all over, so I decided to add the stripes onto it and also some of the black detailing around the headrest. The detail work is now out of the way, so I could move on to applying the various decals onto the dashboard and other interior parts. I added some decal softening solution onto the decals to make them conform to the shapes even better and stick in place. And once that was dry, I moved on to adding various parts and pieces all together, using some super glue to help it stick, of course. I do want to note that the interior is far from perfect. Now normally my interiors look a bit better than this one. Overall it's still not bad, but I had a couple of mishaps during the painting. So of course I used the Tamiya primer, which worked totally fine. Then I applied various different colors, masked it off and all that good stuff, which also worked out fine. And then I decided to tone down the interior and give it an all even leather look all around using some satin clear coat. That, of course, was not the right way to go, as satin is a bit too glossy for my taste, and instead of just letting it cure for the proper amount of time, I just added some matte clear coat on top of it straight away. And that was a mistake. Some of the panel lines were filled up as the paint started peeling, but overall it still looked pretty good, but some of the details are lost. Again, not that big of a deal, you live and learn, but it wasn't bad enough to strip the entire interior and start over. So I'm not going to be pointing out all those mistakes, of course, but if you look closely, you will find a couple here and there. Now, in general, once the dashboard is on, some of the extra details are on, and the entire interior is fit up into the body, they probably won't ever be seen again. So again, not that big of a deal. I live and learn, and of course, I'm not going to try that again. Instead, I'll just skip the satin clear coat and stick to the trusty old matte one. Another mistake I want to point out is the rear seat. The bottom half, I tried to color in those partitions between the seat as they should be black, and that didn't really work out as well as I thought it would. So I clear coated the interior, and therefore I thought I'd sealed the paint off and could just slap in some black paint and remove the excess. Instead, the excess pretty much stayed in place and couldn't really be wiped away. Now, rather than again stripping the entire interior and starting over, which I wasn't really feeling all that good about, I just left it as is and didn't carry on onto the other seats, of course. Live and learn, onto the next one.